Love doesn't always come the way we expect. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's complicated, and sometimes it's only in our lives for a short time, but it still changes us forever. Ammonite isn't just a love story, it's a story about loneliness, connection, love, understanding, and what it means to truly seen by someone. Directed by Francis Lee, Ammonite takes place in the 1840s on the cold, windy shores of Lyme Regis. The film is based on the life of Mary Anning, a brilliant fossil hunter whose work was ignored by the scientific community. But this isn't a movie about history or science. It's about two women, Mary, who has spent years alone, and Charlotte, who feels lost after a personal tragedy. Mary has learned to survive on her own, keeping her emotions buried. She works hard, expecting nothing from anyone. Charlotte, on the other hand, comes from a wealthy world, but feels trapped in melancholy. When her husband leaves her in Mary's care, neither of them expects much. But slowly, something changes. Their love doesn't come from big dramatic moments. It grows in the small things. A glance that lasts a little longer than it should. An unexpected act of kindness. The comfort of being around someone who understands you without words. They don't just fall in love, they find something they've both been missing. But Ammonite isn't a fairy tale. It doesn't promise a perfect ending. Instead, it shows how love, and no matter how short, can leave a mark that never fades. This recap isn't just about what happens in the film, it's about the emotions behind it. Because Ammonite isn't just a story about romance, it's a story about what it means to truly connect with another person, even if only for a moment that doesn't last. Mary Anning's life is simple, but it's also cold and hard. She spends her days on the rocky shores of Lyme Regis, searching for fossils buried in the cliffs. The wind bites at her skin, the sea crashes angrily against the shore, and the work never seems to end. But this is her reality, digging away at rocks but near the sea, and selling whatever she finds just to make ends meet. There's no time for comfort or dreams. Survival is all she knows. Mary is incredibly skilled at what she does. She knows the land like the back of her hand and understands fossils and ancient creatures better than anyone. But no one cares. Men take credit for her discoveries, using her knowledge but never acknowledging her work. She's learned to accept this, even if it stings. No one will ever recognize her talent, and she's long stopped hoping they would. Over the years, the excitement she once had for her work has faded into a quiet, stubborn endurance. She keeps her head down and focuses on the task at hand, ignoring the world around her. Her home is as cold and harsh as the cliffs she works on. She lives with her mother, Molly, a woman who has lost more than just her youth. Molly has buried so much grief in her heart, losing 8 children over the years, that she's become bitter, withdrawn, and emotionally distant. Mary doesn't get the warmth or love a daughter might expect. Instead, her mother treats her more like an employee, someone who must work hard, bring in money, and keep quiet. Their home is filled with the sounds of everyday chores, but there's no laughter, no hugs, no love. Nothing. Despite everything, Mary has learned to cope. She's built walls around herself to keep the hurt out. She doesn't seek out friends or try to connect with others. She's made peace with the fact that she's alone. It's not an easy life, but it's hers. She knows what to expect, and there's comfort in that. Then, Charlotte Murchison arrives, and everything starts to shift. Charlotte's life couldn't be more different from Mary's. She comes from a world of wealth and privilege, a world where women are expected to be delicate, well-spoken, and graceful. Her clothes are elegant, her manners are refined, and everything about her seems to scream proper lady. But beneath the surface, Charlotte is fragile in a different way. She's emotionally broken, lost in grief, and weighed down by the burden of expectations that she feels she can never meet. Charlotte's life has been marked by deep sorrow, the melancholy, leaving her unable to move forward. Her grief is all-consuming, and it's hard for her to be the woman her husband, Roderick, expects her to be. Roderick doesn't understand her pain. Instead of offering her the comfort and care she needs, he sees her sadness as something that needs to be fixed. When they arrive in Lyme Regis, it's not for a holiday or a change of scenery, it's because Roderick wants his wife to get better, as if a change in location could erase her pain. Even in his neglect, it's clear that Roderick doesn't care about Charlotte's sadness. He gets bored with her grief, loses patience, and focuses his attention on something else. Instead of comforting her, he leaves Charlotte to handle everything on her own, in a place she doesn't know, isolated in a town where she has no one. Even with all this neglect, he still sees her as his responsibility, almost like a possession. He hires Mary to take care of her, but it's obvious that Roderick doesn't see Charlotte as someone who needs emotional support. To him, she's just a problem to fix. What's even more surprising is that Roderick isn't the one looking after Charlotte. He pays someone else to do it, and that's where his involvement ends. He doesn't even come back to take her home himself. He doesn't treat her like someone who really needs help. There's also something the movie doesn't really explain, but it's important. Charlotte's pain comes from losing their child. That's why she always wore black before she started her relationship with Mary. There are also a few hints in the movie that suggest they lost a child. Talking about Roderick took us a while, so let's get back on track. Mary, on the other hand, wants nothing to do with the situation. She's already stretched thin with her own life, and she doesn't have time to care for someone else, especially not someone like Charlotte, fragile, spoiled, and out of place in Mary's rough, hard-working world. But money is money, and survival always comes first for Mary. She hesitantly agrees to the arrangement despite her doubts. From the start, their relationship is anything but warm. Charlotte is quiet and withdrawn, uncomfortable in the harsh, simple world Mary inhabits. She's used to luxury, to having everything taken care of, and she's clearly out of place in Mary's bare home, which is as cold and practical as the cliffs outside. The tension between them is obvious. Mary sees Charlotte as just another privileged woman who will crumble when faced with real hardship, and she has no patience for weakness. Charlotte, on the other hand, can't understand how Mary can live so simply, without the comforts she's always known. Neither woman is particularly eager to bridge the gap between them. Charlotte, still grieving, moves through life like a ghost. She doesn't eat much, she barely speaks, and she seems to drift through each day, unable to shake the emptiness inside her. Then she falls ill. The cold, harsh weather in Lyme Regis puts her down, and she gets a fever that leaves her exhausted and stuck in bed. At first, Mary sees it as just one more inconvenience, another burden she didn't ask for, something to add to the list of things she doesn't want to deal with. But despite her initial reluctance, something inside her shifts. She can't simply ignore someone who needs help. So, Mary steps in. She tends to Charlotte, nursing her back to health with a quiet care that surprises even her. She makes simple meals, keeps Charlotte warm, and stays by her side when the fever is at its worst. For Mary, this is the first time in a long while that she's cared for someone in this way, in this intimate, personal way. And it unsettles her. She's spent years avoiding attachment, hiding behind walls of emotional distance, but now, these small acts of kindness feel like a dangerous territory to venture into. As Charlotte becomes weaker, she begins to see Mary in a different light. The woman she once saw as cold and unapproachable is now the one who's keeping her alive. Mary may not speak much, but her actions speak louder than words ever could. In her quiet care, Charlotte finds something she hasn't had in a long time, a sense of safety and being cared for, not out of obligation, but out of love. By the time Charlotte's fever breaks and she begins to recover, Something between them has changed. It's not love, but there's a shift in the air, a quiet understanding that wasn't there before. There's a sense of shared humanity, a recognition that neither of them are truly alone in this world. And that, in itself, is something. For the first time in a long while, Mary and Charlotte both realize that they don't have to face the world alone anymore. Their connection may be fragile, but it's real, and it's something neither of them expected. As the time passed, the distance between Mary and Charlotte begins to close, little by little. It starts with small gestures, nothing huge, just tiny moments that seem insignificant at first. At first, Mary and Charlotte don't talk much. They come from two completely different worlds. Mary is tough, used to hard work and isolation. Charlotte is quiet, delicate in a way that has nothing to do with physical strength. Their conversations are short, polite, but distant. Mary keeps to herself, focused on her fossils, and Charlotte drifts through the days, lost in her grief. But slowly, things start to change, not in big ways, but in the smallest moments. Charlotte watches Mary, not just out of curiosity, but because she wants to understand her. She sees how carefully Mary brushes away the dirt from the fossils, how patient she is in revealing what is hidden beneath. And in some way, it feels like the same thing is happening between them. They are slowly uncovering parts of each other, step by step. Mary notices too. At first, she doesn't think much of it. She's used to people watching her work, usually with no real interest. But Charlotte is different. She isn't just looking, she is paying attention. She's not asking pointless questions or pretending to care. She is just there, quietly learning about Mary's world. And without realizing it, Mary starts noticing Charlotte in a new way too. When she first arrived, Mary thought she would not last a day in the rough, cold life of Lyme Regis. But Charlotte doesn't complain. She doesn't whine about the cold or how simple Mary's home is. She just stays with her. I mean, yes, she doesn't have much of a choice, but she stays without complaining. She tries to adjust. One day, Charlotte even tries to help Mary on the shore. She's clumsy at it, her hands too soft, her steps unsteady, but she tries anyway. And that means something. She's not just waiting for the days to pass. She's reaching toward Mary's world, even if she doesn't fully understand it yet. As Charlotte starts feeling better, something else changes. She becomes more present. She does small things that Mary isn't used to. She makes mushrooms without being asked. She sits a little longer in silence, comfortable instead of awkward. She listens. It's nothing big, but for Mary, who has spent most of her life being overlooked, it's unfamiliar. Mary doesn't know how to react. She just stares at it, feeling something deeper than just fabric in her hands. No one ever thinks about her needs. No one ever considers what might make her life easier. Small moments, quiet gestures, build something between them. It's not dramatic. It's not something they talk about, but it's there, somewhere in silence. For Mary, this is new. She has spent years keeping people at a distance, protecting herself from disappointment. She convinced herself that she didn't need closeness, that she was fine on her own. But now, with Charlotte in her life, she's not so sure. And for Charlotte, something shifts too. She has spent so much time being treated like a burden, like something broken that needs to be fixed. But Mary doesn't treat her that way. She doesn't try to fix Charlotte's grief or tell her how to move on. She just exists beside her. And that somehow feels safe. As time passes, their silences become more comfortable. They don't need to fill every moment with words. A glance is enough. A small shift closer without thinking about it. A quiet understanding that wasn't there before. Charlotte helps with little things around the house, even though Mary never asks. It's an unspoken thing between them, showing care not through words, but through actions. Then one afternoon, Mary takes Charlotte to the beach, not to work, just to walk. The air is sharp, the wind stings their skin, but they don't mind. They sit side by side, not much, but the moment feels important. They went out to sea, feeling the cool breeze on their skin as they jumped into the water. As they swam, something strange and peaceful washed over them. They shared a look, then laughed, enjoying the moment together. It felt like the whole world was far away, leaving only the open sea around them. With every stroke, the water seemed to hold them, making them feel free and alive. In that moment, nothing mattered but the joy of the sea, and they felt completely at ease, like they could stay there forever. Mary doesn't say anything, but she understands what Charlotte really feels. For the first time in a long time, Charlotte isn't lost in her grief. She's just here, in this moment. What's between them is still fragile, still unspoken, but it's growing. And for two people who have spent so much of their lives alone, that means something. By now, Mary and Charlotte's connection is undeniable. It's not just about companionship anymore, it's something deeper, something neither of them can fully explain or understand. They've gone from distant strangers to quiet allies, then to something even closer. But in their world, love like this isn't spoken about. It is not named. Charlotte has changed since the day she arrived in Lyme Regis. When she first came, she was fragile, grieving, and weighed down by sorrow. She barely spoke, barely ate, barely seemed to exist at all. Now, there's life in her again. She moves with more certainty, she smiles more often, and most of all, she seeks out Mary. Not because she needs someone to take care of her, but because she wants to be near her. And Mary, without even realizing it, has let Charlotte into a part of herself that no one else has ever reached. Mary, who has spent a lifetime being overlooked and dismissed, is finally seen. And Charlotte, who has always been treated as someone's wife, someone's duty, finally feels wanted, not for what she can offer, but for who she is. Their love isn't loud or dramatic. It isn't built on big gestures or grand confessions. It's in the small moments, the way Charlotte watches Mary work, the way Mary instinctively reaches for Charlotte's hand when they walk. It's in the shared silences, the ones that feel full rather than empty. It's in the way they care for each other without expectation. But despite everything, neither of them says what they both know to be true. They live in a time where love like theirs isn't spoken about. It is not allowed. And even though they have found something rare, something that feels like it could last forever, they both understand the reality of their situation. They are living in borrowed time. A love that must stay hidden. The world isn't kind to love like theirs. They know this. There's a reason why Mary has kept to herself for so long. There's a reason why Charlotte, even now, hesitates when it comes to fully acknowledging what she feels. They don't live in a time where they can be together without consequence. They don't have the luxury of a future, not the way they want. Their love exists in stolen moments, behind closed doors, in the safety of shadows. It's something precious, something fragile, something they can only hold on to for as long as the world allows them. But even as they try to ignore what's coming, reality catches up to them. Charlotte's time in Lyme Regis is coming to an end. She has healed, at least enough for Roderick to decide it's time for her to return to her life in London. He doesn't ask her if she's ready. He doesn't ask her what she wants. He just assumes, as he always has, that Charlotte will fall back into place beside him. And Charlotte, despite everything, still belongs to that world. She doesn't want to go. Mary can see it in her eyes. But what choice does she have? Mary sees it coming before Charlotte even says a word. She has spent too many years learning how to recognize when someone is about to leave. She tells herself it doesn't matter, that she knew this couldn't last. But it does matter. it matters more than she's willing to admit. Charlotte tries to hold on to the time they have left. She lingers a little longer, watches Mary a little more closely, as if trying to memorize her. But time is cruel, and it keeps moving forward, no matter how much they want it to stop. Their last moments together are filled with unspoken words. There's no grand conversation, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet understanding. Charlotte holds Mary's hand a little tighter. Mary lingers just a little longer, and then she's gone. Mary doesn't chase after her. She doesn't beg her to stay. That isn't who she is. And deep down, she knows Charlotte isn't truly hers to keep. But that doesn't make it hurt any less. Mary returns to her old life. The cold shore, the endless work, the loneliness. But something is different now. Because she is different now. She tells herself that nothing has changed. She still digs through the cliffs, still spends her days searching for things long forgotten. But the truth is, she has been changed. For the first time in years, Mary allowed herself to care. She allowed herself to feel something beyond the weight of survival. And even though Charlotte is gone, even though they can never have what they truly want, that love was real, it mattered, and no one can take that away from them. Mary doesn't expect to see Charlotte again. That chapter of her life is over, or at least she thinks it is. Then a letter arrives. Charlotte invites her to London. She wants to see her again, and for a brief moment, Mary allows herself to hope. When she arrives, she is faced with a painful truth. Charlotte has built a life in London, a life filled with luxury, expectations and rules that Mary will never fit into. And yet, Charlotte still wants her there. She still wants her. Charlotte may have given her a room in her home, a space that is meant just for her. But that isn't enough. What Mary wants, what they both want, is something they cannot have. Not here. Not in this world. So in the end, Mary does what she has always done. She walks away. Not because she doesn't love Charlotte, but because love, when it isn't free, isn't really love at all. And yet, even as she leaves, she knows what they had will always stay with them. It may not be spoken, it may not be named, but it will never be forgotten. Mary walked away from Charlotte's world, but she didn't leave unchanged. She tells herself it's for the best. Charlotte belongs to a different life, a life of wealth, expectations, and a husband who still sees her as his. There was never going to be a happy ending for them. Mary knew that from the beginning, and yet knowing doesn't make it hurt any less. The love between Mary and Charlotte is not the kind of story we often hear. It's not filled with grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It's not a love that burns brightly and fades away quickly. Instead, their love is quiet, understated, and more profound because of its simplicity. Even though their time together is short, it changes them both in ways they may not even fully understand. Their love isn't something the world would recognize. It doesn't fit into the label society puts on relationships. It's not a perfect love story, nor is it one built on a promise of forever. It's simply the love between two people who, in their moment of need, find comfort and understanding in each other. This kind of love isn't easy to describe because it doesn't always look the way we expect it to. But that doesn't make it any less real. Mary's life is marked by solitude and survival. She spends her days digging for fossils, living in the shadows of others' expectations and neglect. She's never had the chance to experience the kind of love that nourishes the soul. Her connection with Charlotte is, at first, something she would never have thought of. It starts as an obligation. Mary takes the job to care for Charlotte out of necessity, not because she's looking for companionship. Yet, as the days pass, something shifts. Charlotte, on the other hand, has lived a life of privilege and loss. She's the wife of a man who sees her as a burden, as something to be fixed rather than cherished. She's carrying the weight of grief, a loss that no one truly understands except for her. Charlotte is trapped in a life of expectations, expected to be the perfect wife, expected to move on from her past, expected to be someone she can never be. When she meets Mary, something changes. In Mary's quiet strength and simplicity, Charlotte finds a space where she can finally be herself. There's no judgment, no pressure, just a woman who sees her. What they share is not just physical closeness. It's not just a fleeting attraction. It's something deeper. It's a kind of connection that is about seeing and being seen. Mary sees the person Charlotte is beneath the layers of grief and expectation. Charlotte sees the woman behind the hardened exterior of Mary. There's a softness in their moments together, a tenderness that neither of them expected. They're both so different from each other, but in that difference they find understanding and comfort. Their relationship isn't perfect. It's filled with complications and misunderstandings. They're both dealing with their own personal battles, their own wounds. But what makes their love so special is that it's not about fixing each other. It's not about changing who they are to fit into each other's lives. It's about accepting each other for who they are in that moment. It's about finding peace in one another, not because they're trying to save each other, but because they understand the deep pain of being seen and still feeling invisible. Even as their time together comes to an end, there's no resentment, no anger. There's just an understanding that they've shared something real. It's bittersweet, knowing that they can't be together in the way they might have wanted, but what they've experienced will stay with them forever. For Mary, Charlotte's presence has changed her. She's no longer just the woman digging for fossils on the cliffs, ignored and unnoticed. Charlotte has given her a glimpse of what it means to be seen, to be valued for who she is, not just for what she can do. She's learned that love doesn't always need to be dramatic or loud. It can be simple, quiet, and still transformative. Charlotte may have come into her life as a passing moment, but she's left a lasting mark. For Charlotte, Mary represents something more than what her life had been. She represents a kind of freedom she didn't know existed. Mary doesn't expect her to be anything other than who she is. There are no demands or expectations, only the space to grieve, to heal, and to be. Charlotte's grief may never truly leave her, but Mary's presence helps her understand that she doesn't have to carry it alone. When they part ways, it's with a sense of acceptance. There's no perfect ending, no dramatic final scene, but there's an understanding that what they shared was precious, and that's enough. They've given each other something that no one else could, an acknowledgement of their pain, their worth, and their existence. Their love might not have been what they hoped for, but it has shaped their lives in ways they couldn't have imagined. It has given them both something they didn't know they needed, a sense of being seen, a sense of being understood. It may not be a love that lasts forever in the traditional sense, but it will live on in them, in the way they move through the world. The legacy of their love is not about the time they spent together or the physical aspects of their connection. It's about the emotional transformation they both undergo. It's about the quiet moments that speak volumes, the unspoken understanding, the gestures of care, the silent acknowledgement of each other's pain. Their love is like a fossil, buried beneath the surface but never truly gone. It's there, in the way they carry each other with them, in the way their lives have been irrevocably altered. In the end, Mary and Charlotte's love is a reminder that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, it's fleeting, but it can still be powerful, and it can still change you forever. That's the true legacy of their love. What did you guys think of this recap? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Sapphic love stories, and see you again here on Sapphic Nook.